Directing your attention back to September of 2016. On September 20th, did you perform an autopsy on the body of a woman identified as Barbara Kendhammer?
Yes, I did.
Were there photographs taken at the autopsy?
Yes, there were.
And did you detail a report of your findings?
Yes, I did.
In addition to performing the autopsy, did you review anything else related to Barbara Kendhammer's death?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
I reviewed a brief, it was a couple-page report on the specifics of the accident provided to me. I reviewed some medical records. I reviewed some photographs of the car at the scene. And ultimately, before I released my report, I did review the entirety of her medical records, photographs of the scene, photographs of Mr. Kendhammer, and photographs of the pipe.
And when you say you reviewed medical records, what medical records did you review specifically?
I reviewed the medical records that were generated at Gunderson Lutheran Medical Center.
Related to this accident or this incident?
Correct, related to the admission after the incident.
When you completed the autopsy, did you have an opinion as to the cause of Barbara Kendhammer's death?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
The cause of Barbara Kendhammer's death was blunt impact injuries of her head and neck.
Can you tell us what this chart depicts? And feel free to reference your report if you need to.
Sure. This is a body diagram, and basically all of the marks that I've put on that body diagram indicate injuries that I've documented on the body.
So can you describe the injuries you observed in Barbara Kendhammer's torso area?
Sure. So on this diagram, first off, you can see there's a little mark across the left side of the neck there. And there I observed a 3 by 1/2 inch area of contusion. A contusion is a bruise or a blunt impact injury. Then you see these sort of marks that I've made across the front of the top part of the chest over the clavicles. So that is a 10 by 3 inch area of red, purple, bruising, and bleeding into the skin. Overlying the area of the left upper chest, there was a 1 1/4 by 1/2 inch area of abrasion that was sort of U-shaped. And an abrasion is another type of blunt impact injury. It's a scrape on the skin. As far as the torso goes, on the back of the top of the midline back, there was an area of bleeding in the fatty tissues beneath the skin that measured 1 3/4 inch by 1 1/2 inch. Then on the right lower back, or the top of the buttock region, there was another bruise or contusion that measured 1 1/2 by 3/4 inches. And then on the left lower back, there was a 3/4 inch purple bruise or contusion. There was also a pink contusion of the right groin that measured 1 1/2 inches. So those are, I believe, all the injuries of the torso on this diagram. There are other injuries of the extremities, though.
Sure, let's talk about them. What injuries did you observe on the arms?
So on the arms, on the right upper arm, on the inner surface, there was a 3 inch area which was a cluster of multiple red, purple contusions or bruises. On the inside of the left arm, there was a 4 by 2 1/2 inch area of patchy bruising that was red and purple. On the back side of the right upper arm, there was a 1/4 inch purple bruise. On the kind of inner part of the right elbow, there was a 1/2 inch very faint purple bruise. And then on the left forearm, on the side in line with the pinky finger, or the ulnar side, there was a 3 inch faint pink bruise. Now moving to the lower extremities, on the right lateral thigh, there was a 1 1/2 inch contusion or bruise. On the front portion of the mid part of the thigh, there was a 1/2 inch bruise. Then slightly below that, there was a 1 1/2 inch area of patchy red, purple bruising or contusion. And slightly below that, there was another area, 2 1/4 inch of red, purple bruising or contusion. Further down on the right shin, there was a 2 1/2 by 1 inch area of tannish colored contusion that had an overlying scrape or abrasion that measured 1/4 inch. Now on the front part of the left leg, there was a 7/8 inch contusion or bruise kind of on the lateral aspect to the side. And then further down towards the ankle, there was a 3 1/4 inch area of red-pink contusion. On the back side of the legs, on the left calf, there was a 5-inch area of red-purple contusion. And then on the right calf, there were 2 bruises. One was 1 1/2 inches, and one was 1 1/4 inches.
So this hand chart, can you tell us what this is?
So this is another diagram that I use that shows the hands, the right and the left, both the front and the back. And any documentation on there is where I documented injuries on the hands.
Starting with the right hand, can you go through the injuries that you found on Mrs. Kendhammer's right hand?
Sure. So on the right hand, on the back of the hand near the wrist, there was a 1/4 inch linear abrasion. And then slightly further towards the fingertips, there was a 1/4 inch faint blue bruise or contusion. On the back of the right ring finger, there were 2 small red abrasions. Now, on the back of the right index finger, there were also 2 small punctate abrasions. Closer towards the back of the hand, there was a 1 1/4 inch area of multiple red and brown linear or line-like healing abrasions. On the left hand, there was an area of purple contusion on the back of the left thumb, and there was an overlying area of abrasion on the back of the left thumb. Then there was a 2 1/2 inch area of contusion and bleeding into the skin on the back of the left hand and on the region of the left 5th finger or pinky finger. And when you flip the hand over, that area of bleeding and contusion extended onto the palm of the left hand as well.
So starting with this diagram in the upper left, can you tell me what you noted that you found in the autopsy of Barbara Kendhammer on her head or face area?
Sure. So starting on the upper left diagram, the front of the face and neck, we can see that there was a 1 inch bruise or contusion, sort of the left upper forehead region. Then there was a 1 inch laceration, which is another blunt impact injury. It's a tear in the skin, and that had been sutured at the hospital, and that was on the middle part of her forehead. Then there was a 1/4 inch pink-purple bruise or contusion that was sort of between the eyebrows. Now around both eyes, there was what we call red-purple periorbital ecchymosis, which is bleeding that can collect around the eyes, and you tend to see that sometimes when you have injuries, for instance, of the nose or forehead, and the blood seeps around the eyes, giving you that raccoon eye appearance. When I examined her nose, I could feel that there were palpable fractures in the nasal bones. On the left temple, I noted that there was a 1/4 inch abrasion or scrape. Then, moving down to the front part of the neck, there was a 3 by 2 inch area of multiple small linear and curvilinear abrasions or scrapes on the skin of the neck. And these were oriented in different directions, and some of them were roughly parallel in their orientation. And those had sort of a tannish appearance to them from some elements of healing. And when I washed the body after the initial examination, it showed a kind of pink abraded base to the injuries. Marked up here, because I couldn't really draw it on the inside of the lips, there was an area of contusion, purple contusion or bruising on the inside of the upper lip that measured 1 1/2 inches, and then on the inside of the lower lip as well, measuring 1 1/4 inch. Moving to this portion of the diagram, showing the back of the head, it can show that there were 3 lacerations on the back of the head, or what we call the occiput, kind of the back lower portion of the head. There was one on the left side that was 3/4 inch, and then there were 2 on the right side that were right next to each other. And when I shaved the hair around these area of injuries, you could see that there was a 3 3/4 inch area of red abrasion sort of encompassing that whole region around those lacerations.
And when you say laceration, can you describe to me what that means in medical terms?
So a laceration is a tear in the skin that's due to a blunt impact injury. So when something causes, intense pressure on the skin and it crushes it and causes the skin to tear, as opposed to a sharp injury, which would be like a bladed object or something very sharp. Now moving down to the lower portions.
Can we go back to the lacerations on the top of the head? I believe you said they were full thickness tears. Can you tell me what that means? Full thickness tears.
Sure. Full thickness just means that the laceration went all the way down to the skull underlying. Sometimes you can have partial thickness lacerations, which only tear the superficial levels of the skin, but this tore all the way through the skin.
Did you notice anything underneath those lacerations related to the skull?
Yes. So there was some bleeding in the tissues underlying those lacerations. And then in the region of this left occipital laceration, there was a skull fracture. And there were multiple fracture lines that coursed from the back left side of the skull through the base of the skull, or the lower portion of the skull, towards the middle lower portion of the skull in a bone called the sphenoid bone.
Now let's go to the bottom diagrams. If you could explain those.
I'm sorry, I think I neglected to mention this injury right here. On the left back of the neck, there was a 3/8 inch pink-red contusion as well. Moving down to the sides of the face, on the right side of the face, I could see that there was a 2-inch area of bleeding in the skin that had collected to the right side of the eye. And then on the right cheek, there was a 2-inch cluster of multiple linear brown healing abrasions. And these abrasions, as you can see sort of from my drawing there, they went in different directions. Some of them aligned potentially with a endotracheal strap that was placed in the hospital, but others were in different directions that wouldn't align with that strap. On the right side, below the right earlobe, there was a 3/8 inch blue bruise or contusion. On the right chin, sort of at the angle of the jaw, there was a red-purple bruise or contusion extending from the chin onto the jawline and to the lateral neck. Then moving to the left side, there was a similar area of red-purple contusion or ecchymosis lateral to the left eye. And then there was an additional area of linear healing brown abrasions on the left cheek. And again, these were multiple linear abrasions that coursed in different directions. And in that region, there was also an overlying 1/4 inch blue contusion. Now, not listed on this diagram, but listed below in free text there, was my examination of the tongue, which showed that there was a hemorrhage on the right lateral side of the tongue, and then another hemorrhage on the left lateral side of the tongue. So the sides of the tongue on both the right and left.
Thank you. Can you tell us what this chart is depicting?
So this is simply another body diagram chart, but on this chart I documented evidence of medical intervention and also evidence of postmortem donation of tissues and also organ donation.
So, if I'm understanding you correct, these are injuries that might have occurred in life-saving measures or through organ donation.
They're not all injuries. Some of them are injuries related to, medical therapy, but others are just evidence of surgical incisions, for instance, things like that.
And did you note any of these injuries on the previous charts that we looked at?
No, those were separately noted. The injuries that I felt were true injuries were separately noted on the previous charts, and this was a chart to document all the evidence of medical intervention.
Thank you. Now let's take a look a little closer at some of the injuries. So we're going to start with the lip area, showing you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 62. Can you describe this photo to us?
Sure. So this is a photograph of Mrs. Kendhammer's face, and specifically a close-up on her lower lip. Her eyes would be right up here, and you can see some of that hemorrhaging around the eyes that's on the corner of the photo. This is just a ruler and a label with the case number from the case. And then this is showing the inside surface of the lower lip. And you can see this large area of hemorrhaging or bruising of the tissues of the lower lip.
And what's previously been marked as Exhibit 63, can you describe that to us?
Sure. This is, again, a similar picture, only this time we're focusing on the upper lip. And you can see this large area of purple, red bruising or contusion on the inside surface of the upper lip. Other things you can note in here, again, is you see the hemorrhaging around the eyes, and then there is that abraded contusion kind of between the brows there as well.
Looking at the injuries to Barbara's mouth and lips, were there any injuries that you noted on the outside of her lips?
There were no significant external injuries. The injuries were really on the inside of the lips.
Were her teeth damaged at all?
I did not see any evidence of injury or fracture to the teeth, no.
Did you see any injuries to the lips that had a curved or linear pattern, like you'd find at the end of a pipe?
No, I did not.
Could these injuries be caused from flailing?
Well, these injuries are blunt impact injuries. So what that means is that a blunt object either struck the mouth or the mouth hit into a blunt object. I can't tell you definitively how that happened. Theoretically, it could be possible from failing to strike your face into a blunt object, but I would think it would have to be pretty forceful to generate this amount of bruising on the inside of the lips.
Now showing you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 64. Can you tell us what's depicted in that photo?
Sure. So this is a photograph. This is actually after autopsy was complete. We can see that there is a bruise on the right jawline and extending onto the right neck. So we see that red-purple bruising there. You can faintly see some abrasions on the neck and some abrasions down here, but I think you'll see them better in a different photograph.
Can you tell us what causes a contusion?
Again, a contusion, much like an abrasion or a laceration, they're all different forms of blunt impact injuries. So when something either strikes the skin or the skin is pushed up against a blunt surface, it causes damage to the blood vessels in the skin, and that causes blood cells to leak out and give that appearance of hemorrhaging into the skin.
Thank you. Show you what's previously marked as Exhibit 65. Can you tell us what this photo is?
This is a photograph of Mrs. Kendhammer's forehead, and you can see her eyebrows right here. We can see this abraded contusion between the brows there. And then this is the sutured laceration that was on the mid part of her forehead.
Did you put those sutures in?
I did not, no.
Did you at any point take the sutures out?
I did.
And why did you do that?
I took the sutures out to see the margins of the wound better, because when it's sutured together, I can't really see it too well, and to see how far the laceration went, and it was a full thickness laceration of the skin of the forehead.
And what would cause this type of injury?
This, again, would be a blunt impact injury, either something striking the head or the head striking something.
Moving on to what's previously been marked as Exhibit 66, can you again tell us what's depicted in this photo?
So this is a photograph of the left side of Mrs. Kendhammer's temple and forehead. And we can see, again, there's some of that hemorrhaging around the eyes. We see there's an abrasion right there on the left forehead. And actually, on these additional photos, it seems there's a little more bleeding around the skin as well. And then right up here is that contusion of the left forehead. It's a little dark from the shadow of the ruler, but it's right there.
When we had the chart up, you referenced the eyes and the raccooning. Can you tell us, again, some causes that would cause the blood pooling around the eyes?
Sure. So when you have injuries either to the forehead or to the midline nasal area, that can cause hemorrhaging into the tissues around it. And then depending on the type of tissue and how much blood is there, the blood will kind of gravitationally fall into more dependent areas. Around the eyes, the skin is actually kind of a looser tissue beneath the skin. And so the blood tends to collect around the eyes and sit there, and it can drain from the forehead or from the nasal region and be around the eyes then.
You also noted an abrasion in between the eyes on her nose, I believe, in the charts.
Yes, there was, on one of the previous photos, there was that abraded contusion kind of in between the brow region, yes.
Okay. And so you've said that you found palpable nasal fractures. How much force does it take to break someone's nose?
I cannot give you a definitive number for that. It varies on the individual and how they're falling and things like that, but it does take some force to cause a fracture, obviously.
And did you see anything in the nasal area or in the forehead that would resemble Mrs. Kendhammer being struck by a pipe?
I did not see anything with a curvilinear pattern to suggest that the end of a pipe struck her forehead or nose, no.
Thank you. I'm going to go back a minute to these lip photos. You said that it was a blunt force trauma. Could that also be, could pressure to those lips cause those injuries?
Yes, if you had intense pressure over the lips, pushing the lips against the teeth, for instance, that is in itself a form of blunt force trauma, yes.
So could you give an example of pushing the lips over the teeth? What would that mean to you?
For instance, if someone had either, a quick push would be, for instance, a blow to the mouth, such as a punch or something like that. But a more prolonged pressure, such as someone holding their hand against the mouth and pushing against the teeth and mouth, could cause this injury to the lips as well.
Thank you. Moving now to what's been previously marked as Exhibit 67. Can you tell us what this picture depicts?
This is a close-up of Mrs. Kendhammer's right cheek. So I described there was this cluster of multiple linear brown healing abrasions. And you can see some of them are coursing this way, some of them are coursing this way. We have one up here, several over here, more towards the side. And so these are blunt trauma injuries, and abrasions are scraping against the skin.
In this photo, which has been marked as Exhibit 68, can you describe this?
This is the left side of Mrs. Kendhammer's cheek. And similarly here, we have multiple healing linear brown abrasions going in different directions. Some of them are coursing more vertically. Some are more horizontally. And then it's sort of faint, but there is a small bruise in this area as well, kind of a pinkish blue bruise.
You said when we were looking at the charts that you attributed some of these abrasions to some therapeutic interventions, but not all. Is that correct?
I said it's possible that some of them could be related to therapeutic interventions, yes.
Is it also possible that coarse grass or vegetation would cause that type of injury if someone's face was in it?
If someone's face was being pushed into something that had that pattern, it could possibly cause this injury pattern as well, yes.
Showing you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 69. Can you tell me what's depicted in this photo?
This is a picture of the back of Mrs. Kendhammer's head, and these are the 3 lacerations that I described earlier. So the top of her head is in this direction, and her neck is down here. So this is the left back side of the head, and there was a 3/4 inch laceration there. And then on the right side, it's a little difficult to see here, but there's 2 lacerations right next to each other.
What would cause these type of lacerations?
And these are blunt impact injuries, so they could be caused by something striking the head. Alternatively, they could be caused by the head being falling or striking or pushing into something as well. That's blunt and firm.
About how many impacts do you think would have caused these 3 lacerations?
I think it's likely that there were at least 2, if not 3 impacts here, because this site is somewhat separate from these 2 clustered. I can't say definitively if this represented one injury against an uneven object, but I do feel there are at least likely 2 injuries or 2 impacts here.
Would the end of a pipe traveling with force cause all of these lacerations?
Objection to competence. Well, I'll sustain the objection the way it's phrased.
Are you familiar, when you did your autopsy, you said you reviewed the accident report?
There was a brief 2-page document, I believe, yes.
And so you're familiar with the facts as they were given by Mr. Kendhammer?
Yes.
And was there anything about these injuries that concerned you related to the version of events told by Mr. Kendhammer?
Object to the form of the question. Sustained, ask, just sustained.
Was there anything concerning about these injuries to you?
Object to the form of the question. Sustained.
When you looked at these injuries, do you think they came from a pipe?
I do not believe that these injuries are consistent with the end of a pipe striking the back of the head, no.
And why do you have that opinion?
Because I don't see any evidence of a curvilinear mark from the end of a pipe. I also think that if a pipe was traveling with great force and struck the back of the head, if you're going to say that these were all from the pipe, then it would have to be traveling sort of tangentially across the back of the head, and I believe that in that situation, it would actually avulse the tissue because the intense energy of the pipe traveling at that speed into the back of the head would cause worse damage than just these few lacerations.
Showing you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 70. Can you tell me what's depicted in this photo?
So this is a photo that was taken while Mrs. Kendhammer was still in the hospital. And this is a photograph that shows multiple linear, curvilinear, and irregular abrasions over the neck. And it's sort of on the front part of the neck, and it does extend up sort of onto the underside of the chin almost, right where the neck creases would be. And you can see that many of them are linear, and they're coursing in different directions. And some of them have a sort of parallel array. And these are abrasions or scrapes against the skin.
Could have this been caused by an object with a sharp edge?
Yes, well, abrasions, when you're having linear scrapes against the skin, they are usually caused by something that has a sharp margin being dragged across the skin. When I say sharp, it don't mean necessarily a blade or anything like that, but something that has a linear, sharp margin.
Would these be injuries you suspect of a stab wound?
No.
Are these injuries that you would expect with the end of a pipe scratching her?
I do not see any evidence of a curvilinear area of abrasion, a significant large curvilinear. There's small, little linear and curvilinear abrasions that have some slight curve to them, but nothing that I would deem to be consistent with the end of a pipe, no.
Could these be from fingernails?
Yes, possibly.
You also talked earlier about a contusion on the left posterior neck. And I don't see it clearly depicted in this photo, but I want to talk about it a minute. Could you describe, showing this photo, that contusion just with your pointer, where it was?
It's sort of impossible to show on this photo because this is really the front of the neck.
Okay.
So it would be on the back of the neck, and it was on the left side. So the portion of her neck that's against the bedding or pillow back on this side is where that contusion was.
That contusion that you noted, would that be consistent with a seatbelt injury for a
No.
passenger?
No, that would not be consistent with a seatbelt injury.
You also noted that Mrs. Kendhammer had a cricoid fracture.
Yes.
Can you tell us what that is?
Sure. So in the neck, underlying the skin and the fatty tissues, there is a complicated structure that takes air down to the lungs and then also takes your food and your liquids down to your gastrointestinal system. So in the top part of the neck, you have sort of the tongue and the oropharynx, and then you have a bone called the hyoid bone, which is a horseshoe-shaped bone in the top of the neck. Beneath that, you have the thyroid cartilage, and for instance, in a man that's sort of prominent, we call it the Adam's apple. Just below that thyroid cartilage is the cricoid cartilage, and it's a cartilaginous ring that's at the top of the trachea, and then the trachea takes your air down to your lungs. So that cartilaginous ring, the cricoid cartilage, was fractured, and there were multiple fracture portions on the front of the ring.
What causes cricoid fractures?
Cricoid fractures can be seen in either compression of neck, such as manual strangulation, where there's intense pressure on the cricoid. They can be seen in blunt impact injuries. They can be seen when you have a strike or a chop to the neck, or you have an impact of the neck against a hard surface.
Could a seatbelt cause a cricoid cartilage fracture?
It is possible that a seatbelt could cause a cricoid cartilage fracture in certain situations.
Did you think that was the case in this instance?
I did not think so, no.
And why not?
Object to the form of the question.
Why not?
So when I see the cricoid cartilage fracture with the hemorrhage around it, as well as that pattern of multiple multiple linear and irregular abrasions on the neck, and I did not see any evidence of what we call a seatbelt sign, which is a abrasion or contusion on the side of the neck where the seatbelt would be. When you put all of these things together, the findings on the skin surface on the neck, as well as the injuries of the cricoid cartilage and the bleeding around it, and the totality of all the injuries that I saw, I did not feel that this injury was consistent with a seatbelt injury.
Could someone holding a cup with their head snapping down cause this type of injury?
I want more clarification on that hypothesis, I guess, or that scenario.
When someone's head goes down, would you expect their cricoid cartilage to fracture?
If you somehow had a very forceful downward snap of the neck and the cup was held in an area where a firm edge hit that area, it's possible, but then the cup would have to be held downwards and you wouldn't expect injuries elsewhere.
Thank you. Showing you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 71. Can you tell us what this picture is depicting?
Sure. So this is a picture of Mrs. Kendhammer's right hand, and you can see her nails. They're a bit dirty as far as there's some brownish material under the nails. And then on the right ring finger, there is an irregular margin where it looks like there has been tearing or ripping of the margin of the nail.
The brown underneath the nails. Could that be staining?
It's some sort of accumulation or of something brown under the nails, or potentially, yes, something brown could stain the nails, but I think it's more accumulation of brown material under the nail.
Showing you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 72. Can you tell us what this photo shows?
Sure. So this is the right hand again, and on the ring finger, we can see that there's two small healing abrasions on the back side and kind of the side portion of the ring finger.
Do they appear to be fresh injuries?
Well, they appear to be healing, but they do appear to be recent in that they haven't completely healed or formed a new scar base or anything like that. I can't tell you exactly when they occurred, but they do appear to be relatively recent.
What's previously been marked as Exhibit 73 is being shown. Can you tell us what that is?
This is just a close-up on the right ring finger nail to show that torn, irregular margin.
Was a clipping taken from this finger for purposes of DNA analysis?
Yes, fingernail clippings were taken from all the nails.
And I'm now showing you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 74. Can you tell us what this photograph shows?
This is a photograph of Mrs. Kendhammer's left hand, and you can see this area of contusion and bruising on the left fifth finger or pinky finger, and also extending onto the side and back of the left hand.
Is this the type of bruise that you would expect from IV placement or any therapeutic type interventions?
No, it is not.
And why not?
It's not in an appropriate location for IV placement, extending onto the fingers. And also this bruise extends onto the palmar surface as well, or the palm of the hand, and that is not expected for IV placement and things like that.
When you completed your autopsy of Barbara Kendhammer, did you see any injuries or evidence in the autopsy of a pipe impaling Barbara Kendhammer?
No, I did not.
And are the opinions you gave today given to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes, they are.
No further questions.